Master of One podcast. You can find me at ericawilliamsillustration.com.
Welcome to this Sandbox episode of the Master of One podcast, part 2 for this week. This week, we talk to hand lettering artist and illustrator Shauna Panczyszyn. I'm Andrew, your Master of Art and Design.
I'm Patrick, your Master of Television and Film.
And I'm Luke, your Master of Toys and Games.
So prepare yourself to enter a world full of fun, fantasy, and fancy drawings, because it's time to get started.
I'm going to the world of make-believe.
So for this Sandbox episode, we're excited to talk to somebody who is one of our closest friends to the show recently. We met her initially back when we were doing our meetup in Orlando, and she actually participated in our Jared Mariama contest. And she is now in our artist coloring book, and she does streaming on Twitch for Adobe. The incredibly talented Shauna Panczyszyn.
Hey.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hi.
I like the phrase buddy buddy.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that makes it into the final episode, but just in
We'll
general,
see.
Patrick really likes that word.
Yeah.
So Shauna, like I said in the intro, we've now worked with you on a couple different things, and we're excited to have you on for a full episode. We had you on during Creative South for a hot seat. You kind of shared a hot seat with Sid. And so we are excited now to hear your whole story and flesh this thing out. So welcome to the show. We're glad that you're here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
So what we do typically when we get things started is we have our guests tell us their story. So we just say, hey, what's your Wikipedia page about yourself? Tell us a little bit about you and how you got to where you are now.
Okay. Well, so I'm Shauna Lynn, hand lettering artist, illustrator. I've been drawing since I could literally hold a pencil. I got very lucky that my parents were incredibly supportive of the fact that I enjoyed art, because I come from a family where my great-grandfather was a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor, my dad's a dentist. I'm the first in the line to not do medicine.
Oh, okay.
And I'm the oldest grandchild, actually, so I set the precedent really low for my cousins.
Nice.
And so I got very lucky. There was a art camp I wanted to take or a class I wanted to take, what have you. My parents would find a way to put me in it. And I took a computer graphics course in 9th grade that my dad saw the work I was doing, and this is before I had even a Wacom tablet. I painted with a mouse, and I am still impressed by what I did with a mouse. But he's like, have you ever thought of looking into graphic design? You really ought to. And I was like, no, I didn't. I will look into that. And I had every intention of going into graphic design until my senior year of high school, when I decided I would go to state school for opera. So
yeah, I mean, that's a correlation.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Yeah, you have dentists and doctors, and so to break the mold, you want to go sing opera. That makes sense.
Exactly. Yeah, so I did get into the program at the University of North Florida and spent a semester in the opera program when I realized I was sick most of the semester, to be fair, but I also hated practicing. And I was getting increasingly jealous of all the kids on campus with their art portfolios and stuff, lugging them around and drawing around the lake and such. So ultimately, my second semester, I changed tracks and switched to the design program and had to do my prereqs to get into that. And then ultimately did graduate with a degree in, Bachelor of Fine Arts with a concentration in graphic design. So technically, I'm only a fine arts major, but whatever, semantics. But I got an internship at this agency in Jacksonville called Burnett Garcia, and I'm still in touch with them to this day. It's been 7 years since I graduated, and they are the reason that I am sitting here. When I was there, they recognized that I was an illustrator before I recognized that I would be an illustrator, and so they threw me on a ton of these different projects where I actually got to really flex my muscles when it came to just conceptual illustration and having fun. And the creative director at the time put me on a project for this poster called The World of Foot, which if you search that on Google, it pops up everywhere. I did a bunch of hand lettering for that, and that's when I found my love of lettering. I've been doing lettering since I was little, not realizing it was like a thing I could do to make money.
Right.
And so it ended up, this poster got into the Communication Arts Type Annual. And I found out when I was working in-house at a fashion corporation. And as soon as it went live as soon as on stands, within I think about a couple weeks, I got a gig with OC Weekly in California doing a cover where I got to draw lettering all around a portrait of Dita Von Teese. And so that kind of went somewhat viral on like, it's all like, it'll be recommended to me in Pinterest. It's the weirdest thing to pop up.
You seem like you would enjoy this.
Yeah.
That's a really good algorithm.
Yeah, I'm like, I do enjoy that because I did that.
So you're completely freelance now, right?
I am. Well, what ended up happening was I worked in-house in Jacksonville, and then I got an email from an art director down in Orlando who wanted to interview me for a position at a local agency. And I did go down, I interviewed, I got the job, and moved within 3 weeks. Like, I interviewed, didn't hear back for like 2, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, we're hiring you. Moved down here in 2 weeks. And I was like, I got 3 jobs I got to quit up here. So can you give me 3? I was like, I've got 3 jobs, and I have to find someone to take over my lease with my best friend. Like, I can't just drop everything.
Yeah, no kidding.
So as luck would have it, actually, one of our friends happened to need to move to Jacksonville the same week that I needed to leave. So she took over my lease, and I moved down here. My parents found my apartment, bless their hearts. So I'm across the street from the ice rink here, conveniently enough.
Yeah, no kidding.
And I started the job, and 3.5 months later, they fired me with no reason. And so I was sitting on my couch with my parents. They hauled butt from Daytona in Friday afternoon rush hour traffic to be with me. Got here 10 minutes after I did. It took me 45 minutes to get from where I was working. And that's normally a 15-minute maximum commute. So it was really bad traffic that day.
Wow.
And they just were sitting there, and I go, I'm in a job hunt, and I'll find a job. And I was like, I just tried freelancing. You didn't move down here to job hunt. You moved down here to work. Yeah. And, you could work from this cute little desk you have. You can work in this cute little apartment that you have set up. You can make your own schedule. You can go actually use the ice rink that's across the street. You could get a dog. And so she's like,
it's something you had said you'd wanted to do before, like freelancing.
Yeah, it's something I'd wanted to do for a long time. It was in my 10-year plan, and I just happened to hit it 10 years early. Yeah. And but I got very lucky that they were incredibly supportive of it. She's just said, give it 6 months, and if in 6 months it doesn't work, then go job hunt. But she forced me to come home for 5 days. She's like, you didn't get a vacation at all in between you're quitting your jobs and moving. You were just going and start your job.
Right.
So she had me come home and just lay low for a few days, just rest. We found an attorney to take care of some stuff that we wanted to take care of with the job. And then a week to the hour almost, I got my first freelance gig for a client that I had as a client for several years.
Oh,
okay.
awesome.
So going from, so you have the background actually going to, the formal education. And then you had clients, and you've worked in an agency environment, and now being freelance. So what is that like? Because now you're responsible for, finding the client, maintaining the relationship, managing things like billing and things like that. I'm guessing you weren't doing before. So what is that newfound responsibility like? And what are the tools that have helped you succeed in that?
Well, what ended up happening, because I do focus in illustration and lettering, was I had been searching to get representation from an agent. And so when I got fired, I'd already had about 3 or 4 months of searching at that point. I'd applied to a few different ones. And one in particular was like, your work's not ready, but we like it. Keep submitting to us. And so when I got fired, I emailed my contact there, and I said, hey, I've decided to take the plunge and go full-time freelance. Would it be okay if I continue to send you stuff? She goes, by all means, please. I'll continue to put you in front of the group. And 6 months after getting fired, so it's actually, 4 years in June will be when they took me on.
Oh, cool.
I'd done work for Jacksonville magazine, and I sent them, it was all digital chalk, but it was hand lettering around a taco. and I sent it to them, and they're like, "That's it. That's what we're looking for. Your contract's coming next week."
Wow.
And they took me on. And so thankfully, like, because I didn't really know how to do the billing. I didn't know how, like, I got very lucky. Like the first client that I got freelancing full time, she's like, "What do you charge for this?" And I was like, $300. She goes, No, higher. And I go, $500. She goes, No, higher. And I was like
16,000. She's like, no, get it real.
Yeah, don't be an idiot.
Yeah. And I was like, and I finally just said, I don't know. And she goes, "How about we say 800, and then you give a $200 buffer, and that way," she goes, "because you're going to want that $200 buffer. I know my coworkers." So thankfully, I actually got very lucky that my clients were kind of guiding me. And then the other job that I'd gotten was for 3M Post-it Note, and they were just like, "This is what we're paying you," so I didn't have to figure it out.
Sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So most of it was just like, I got lucky. My clients were pretty easy when it came to billing and stuff. Like I just would send it and they'd send the check, or they'd get, do a direct deposit. And then when I got the agent, they took over the billing, they took over the invoicing, they took over hunting down my clients. Like I still have to find my own clients at times, but they have to go through my agent, and they get a cut of the overall fee for handling the contracts, handling the invoicing, handling the initial contact with the agent with the client before I am with them.
So I want to ask you this then. So we talked about you being a hand lettering artist, and you talked a little bit. You said that you did this thing with kind of a all digital but chalk lettering. So your look has a very specific style to it. I mean, it's very much you. When I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's totally you. Here's my question, and I just want to know from your mindset. You now have been doing this for about 4 years, you said. And the thing that kind of got you that job is a lot of what you're still doing. Do you feel like this is a niche that will always ring true, or do you feel like this is a style that is you just happen to kind of fall into right when it was hitting and very hot, and you're very aware of needing to diversify? Like where does your head go on that topic? Does that make sense?
It does. It's honestly, it's a little bit of both. What I've seen since I started, because when I jumped into the full-time freelance and full-time lettering was really high on the trend, as well as was the chalk. And I've removed a lot of projects over the years. Like as I update my portfolio, but there was a point where my portfolio was all digital chalk, and that's what I was getting hired for. And then I started to see a slow progression out. Yeah. Where I was getting hired less and less and less for digital chalk, and I was getting hired more for like ink style lettering. And so I've sort of kind of followed what the clients are looking for and kind of tried to keep just a step ahead of what the trend is.
Sure.
But as far as the style goes, I'm always pushing what I do farther. I sent stuff to my friend Danielle Evans last night, and I was like, "Look, I did." And she's like, "That's cool. That's exactly the kind of thing where, you need to keep pushing. This is awesome." And I posted on Instagram last night. It just says Sunday night vibes and just very illustrative lettering. And
sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but just on that note, you had even said when we first met with you, when you came to the meetup when we were at Disney, that what you did for our competition was totally out of the norm for you. And that was you did have some of the typography in there, but there was a lot of character illustration that was happening inside of there. And so I just was wondering, because I pick up on that as you're trying new things to kind of to stay ahead of the curve. And I think that's a good illustration, I think, that you said, to say that it's important to stay ahead because and follow what the lead of your clients, as opposed to just saying, no, I do chalk lettering really well, and so that's kind of where I'm going to stay. So anyway, I just think that's a good thing for people to hear, that you're constantly pushing yourself into new ventures, but within still maintaining the very Shauna aspects of your design. It's not like you're going completely realistic with it or anything like that. It all kind of falls in line with your general the fun aesthetic that you bring to things. So
Yeah, and it works. I'm like right now I'm trying to push things to be a little looser and just trying to be less of a perfectionist with things, and it's working for the aesthetic because in the end, even though lettering is so trendy, like eventually like people, you're gonna find that there are the trenders, the ones that jump on the trend just because that's what's popular, and they're like, I love lettering. But the second something gets popular, they're gonna be like, oh, I love this, and they're gonna leave lettering.
Sure.
And so it's gonna be those that have stuck with it that are going to have the longevity in lettering.
Yep.
Like there's always going to be lettering jobs, and there's been there's been points where I've been lowballed by for work, and I've lost work to people who are who will lowball, or people who are on the trending where they just kind of copy what other people are doing.
Sure.
And they're the ones that are going to jump ship the second lettering's not popular
So
anymore.
actually, I wanted to ask you about that, and I'm trying to find the most like respectful way of formatting this question because I mean it like in the best way possible. Your work looks almost like it's very fun and casual looking. So someone seeing it that doesn't know what goes into it could have the perception that it isn't necessarily like difficult. Like it could feel that way because it's like these really free flowing lines and like the chalk stuff, the that type of thing. How do you like fight that mentality when you're dealing with a client that doesn't understand the technical aspect, that doesn't understand, the someone that picked it up because they saw it on Pinterest and they were just knocking something out versus someone that has invested like a lot of time into like honing this craft. Like, how do you explain to them or I don't know, how do you talk to someone about what you do and what sets it apart?
I think a lot of it has to do with just the fact that I'm like, I can show like, this is what my process is, and you can see exactly how I format something. And if, there are people that can copy my style, and that'll always be a thing, but my dad actually put it the best way. 'Cause I had this conversation with him once where I was just like, I don't know how to handle this. Like I'm looking on like Pinterest and Instagram, and these people are just copying my style, and he's like, they can copy your style all they want. Your style is just a style. He goes, they can't copy what's in your head, and they can't copy what's in your heart. And so they could copy my style all they want, but they're never going to be able to copy me. Because what I put out there is I put my entire soul into what I do. And if someone could just copy exactly like what I throw on Instagram, and that's fine, but it's going to lack that energy. Sure. Because I feel like there's a certain energy that goes into your work no matter what style you do, and you can feel when someone's like just kind of testing the waters with something because it's going to lack that energy.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
So I want to shift us to the other side of what we know that you do. When we talked before at Creative South, you do a lot of streaming for Adobe. So talk to us about where that came from and exactly kind of what you do for them.
So I actually stream on my own channel. Okay. I'm at twitch.tv/Shauna LYNN. But because I started streaming over a year ago, I'm not the most consistent with it. It's not something that I really think I'll ever make like my full-time gig.
Right.
But it was a way for me to feel like I could give sort of mini workshops without having to physically be in a space.
Right.
And I could share my knowledge with people, and they can ask questions and they can interact, and I can stay in the comfort of my like little apartment with my dog. But what ended up happening is I initially got into it because I know like Dina Rodriguez was streaming, and I came across Sid Weiler's work, and I started to stream a little bit, and it was Sid who was like, no, start streaming more. Like you've got fun work, like start streaming more. And she ended up actually with like, she'd share when I'd go live. And so that brought a few people in. And then like my following has slowly grown from like, 3 people to, I just passed 800 people.
Nice.
And recently, I think it was like 4 months ago, I was streaming I was streaming late at night, and Adobe's channel rated me. And I tuned into a few of the Adobe streams. I go watch Sid's. I watch a few others that are on there. And all of a sudden I'm sitting there and it just says Adobe has hosted you. And I was like, what? what's happening. Like literally, and it's just like this flood. And what it was one of our mods, Finch, went and had recommended that they raid me. And then that night, they reached out and they're like, "Hey, would you be interested in streaming lettering on Adobe?" And I was like, "Sure,
Yeah,
that'd be awesome." And so like the first like 3 or 4 streams, I like had the nervous sweats every time I went on. And so it was super nerve wracking. So I was like, oh crap. I'm like,
I still get those.
yeah, like I'm representing Adobe, even though like I don't work for them.
Sure.
I have to, I'm representing them on the stream. So I have to like pretend like my grandma's in the other room. And if I wouldn't say it to my grandmother, I don't say it on stream.
Yeah.
Adobe is very grandma friendly.
Yeah.
That's almost their motto. It's their second motto. Adobe,
and
a very grandma friendly company.
Yeah. Well, and it's been a really great experience for me to be able to get on there. The first few weeks, I was just sort of, they threw me wherever they could fit me in because they were kind of reworking their schedule. They were changing it from, I don't remember what their schedule was before, but they were changing it so it was 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific time.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of reworking their streamers that were the most active and throwing me in where they could fit me. And so I now actually have a weekly set time where I'm every week from 4 to 7 p.m. Eastern, 1 to 4 p.m. Pacific, and on Thursdays.
Awesome.
And so I get to just, and it's really great. Like I get to do pretty much whatever I want to do on stream. Like if I want to work on a poster, I can work on a poster. I've been doing a lot of process lettering where I like kind of pimp out my brushes. I make a lot of my own Photoshop brushes. And so I'll demo them on stream and I'm like, you guys can buy them here.
Oh, cool.
And
that's awesome.
I show like how I do, the skeleton, how I build up the lettering, how I clean up the lettering, and how I get to a final sketch. And every now and then I'll take it a little further and ink it up. But I'm really enjoying the process stuff lately. So I'm doing a lot more of the process. But for a while I was doing just a ton of greeting card designs and just sharing those as I went. And it's been fun. I did a poster sketch for Artists for Education one day, and I showed that I went from like having nothing to a final sketch with them in 3 hours.
Nice.
Because I wanted to show them like I don't just pop on here with an idea ready to go. And so they got to watch me, flesh out like 4 different poster ideas before I came up with where I wanted to go with it.
So when you do that though, is there, I know you said that you can kind of do whatever you want. It sounds like, we all know that Adobe is very artist friendly in the sense that it wants to promote good artists and good art and everything. So you being able to promote your brushes and say that stuff, that's all cool. But are there any kind of restrictions as it comes to working on client projects or things that have licensing issues or whatever? Because I tuned into one of yours when you were doing the Tangled piece. And it kind of got my brain going about whether or not, I know that was probably a fan piece anyway, but it got me thinking about licensing and how that stuff works as it comes to the Twitch streaming.
Shauna is just moving her hand across her neck very subtly right now.
No, what it is because it falls under parody law. Like we're not selling it.
Right.
We're just doing it for fun. I haven't done a ton of Disney themed things on the Adobe channel because I try to stick more to educational, and then I do the Disney stuff on my own stream because I can blast Disney tunes while I do it.
Yeah.
But there's some streamers that do fan pieces. Like one was doing portraits from this movie Howl's Moving Castle, and I think I did what's that newest movie, Moana. I did a coloring book page with Maui and stuff on the Adobe stream just for something different. And,
as it falls under parody law, that makes total sense. If you're doing client work, whether it's Disney or otherwise, you're doing client work and license work. Do they have restrictions about any of that stuff?
Yeah, if your client's cool with it, you can totally stream it. They like it. It's. I haven't had any client work to stream in the sense of like thinking to ask my client like, hey, can I share this online live? Because some clients are really weird about that. Like they don't want the work to be seen before it's done.
Sure.
Right. Yeah.
But in the near future, I might get someone who's having me do editorial, and I can just ask if I can do that live on stream. And because I get a lot more questions in regards to freelance. And so that would be a good way to be able to show them, like, this is real world work. But like I did work for the Knot this year. And so I was able to like kind of pick up the magazine and actually show them like that I physically have it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. On Instagram we've been watching kind of how all this stuff has been unfolding and seeing it on the shelves and you getting a copy of it. Like that's been an exciting thing to watch through like the third party lens of Instagram.
Yeah. My mom sent me a picture from Publix of my dad holding it up and he's just like, why am I holding a wedding magazine?
So your mom and dad, this is just a side note, this isn't a question. Your mom and dad seem to be the most supportive parents that have ever existed in the history of the land. Based on the conversations we've had outside of this and then everything you've said during this. So let's shift in our final moments. Let's shift to what is brand new and what we got to see a little taste of at Creative South. Talk to us about Simple Thoughts.
Yeah, so Simple Thoughts is sort of so I applied for the Adobe Creative Residency last year, and I had this goal of like creating a card line. And I, spoiler, didn't get it. But I decided, you know what, screw it. I'm going to make this card line happen anyways. Yeah, those cards. And so I started just before November, I think, finally like sitting down and saying like, I'm going to make this happen. And so I did a ton of Christmas cards, which if I had actually like looked at my past, like when I was working for the Fashion Corporation, we were doing Christmas stuff in August. And in December, we were doing Valentine's Day. So like I have to get used to, again, like my holidays being opposite polar ends again. Because I'm like next month, I'm going to start blasting Christmas music so I can start working on Christmas cards for this upcoming year.
You're one of those.
Well, and because what it is, if I get a wholesale account, they're going to want to buy them in June so that they have them ready to go for the holidays. So I have to have them done like early in the year. And it's just, it's a weird, like backwards opposite polar end thing. And, but I wanted to make it happen. So like I sat down and I started kind of brainstorming some ideas, and I was chatting it through with my mom, and because really I hit the jackpot with my parents. They really are the most supportive people I could ever have gotten. And we're going through, and I threw out the name. I was like, Simple Thoughts. And she's like, I actually kind of like that. She goes, that's cute. She goes, because, we're like, well, when you send a card, it's kind of just like a simple little like, hey, I'm thinking of you, and just keeping it very, we want it to be simple. We want it to just be a simple like, hey, I thought of you.
Yeah.
But it also has a double meaning because my dog is not the smartest little crayon in the box. We joke that he's very simple-minded, which is actually not far from the truth. His life is just very like happy-go-lucky.
Yeah.
But so he's the unofficial mascot of Simple Thoughts Co. That's why I have a little pin of him.
Gotcha.
So I tried to like launch it back in December, and it just failed. Like I had no sales, and I was just like, why am I doing this? Why did I tried to make it happen, and it didn't happen. It was like that scene in Mean Girls, like, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's never going to happen. And so I ended up sitting down, and my mom was like, yeah, sit down and like actually flesh this freaking thing out if you're going to do it, and then launch it later this year. So I gave myself a day, and I said, I'm going to launch it on June 1st, and I'm going to have it done. I said, but I'm going to have the majority of the product done before Creative South because I want to have a table. Yeah. And so I pulled together all the product, and I ended up having to do a reorder of some cards because I sold out of most of the ones that had dogs on them. And I did a pop-up shop at West Elm a couple weeks ago, which unfortunately they had no foot traffic. So I made 4 sales. It was like it was a good experience to get out there, but it was kind of depressing.
At least you're in West Elm.
But at least I'm in West Elm.
That's actually, on the resume now.
West Elm's actually very supportive of artists. It's really cool. They have they have a program that I'm going to apply to where they'll wholesale stuff and put it in their stores.
Oh, cool.
And I happened to walk into this one in Orlando, and my friend from Jacksonville had stuff in it. So it's cool.
Do you think that you should do more shirtless firemen?
What?
Just in general.
For the cards. I'm saying like.
You're doing great, Patrick.
You have
You're doing
Christmas
great.
cards. You have Easter cards. And you mean designing cards, right, Patrick? Exactly.
Okay, just clarify.
Because most of those cards you see are okay. I'm following your train of thought now.
Those are the ones that me and Mackenzie always buy to give out to people.
Took a
so I was
second.
just
That
Oh,
was
okay.
rough.
I'll do dogs dressed as career people. How about that?
There you go.
okay.
How about that? Like I'm very sarcastic with the cards. Like there's one that just says it's a gift card, you're welcome. So I'll see if I can make shirtless firemen happen.
I wouldn't worry about it too much. Sounds like it's
no
a
one
pretty
else.
niche market.
Do it for Patrick. Patrick
I am
really wants
convinced.
more shirtless firemen.
Yeah, just for me, I would super appreciate it. I'll still buy cards anyway. So
Okay.
we want to be respectful of time. We have to transition to final questions, and
Okay.
Patrick has to get out of this somehow.
No, I have so many I'm sitting here with because we have so many things we haven't talked about. So let's jump into earlier you mentioned that your apartment was
Police officers, maybe. Literally any public service.
Have we thought about EMS? Earlier you
Don't
mentioned
do
your apartment
accountants
was
though.
across the street from a rink, like an ice rink.
Uh-huh.
But we didn't say why that was important, and that's because you do figure skating.
I do. I've been skating since I was 10.
So what is that like to make time for a hobby? Because I don't think many of us are doing that very well right now. And
Well-
yeah.
Well, so what I've kind of found in the last few months is that I apparently actually have anxiety, and I didn't realize it was like something I actually had. And I texted my mom one day, and I'm like, I'm having heart palpitations. What's happening? She goes, does it feel like you can't breathe every few seconds? I'm like, yeah. And then they stop and they start right back up again. She goes, that's an anxiety attack. And she's like, are you stressed? I'm like, no. And she's like, okay, well, welcome to the world of anxiety. But what I have found is that skating is actually what keeps me very grounded, and it can actually stave off anxiety attacks and stress. So if I'm having I'm having a lot of panic, or I'm just really stressed out, like I try to just step over there and even just get on for a half an hour, and it makes a big difference. But every day they have a session from about 12 to 1:45, and I have some friends that I meet up with, and so it's almost like a daily thing where it's my social hour for my like lunch period.
Yeah.
And one of them is actually she's a graphic designer, so she always gets on me. She's like, listen, you're young, make sure that you carve out time for this, make sure you carve out time to get massages and take care of your neck and take care of your back and take care of everything so that you don't end up with the issues I have now. And I'm like, gotcha.
Yeah, that's great. I have
sound advice.
I have one more thing before you take it, Andrew. You said listening to Disney music. What's the number one Disney song that you're gonna play?
Number one Disney song, Hellfire from Hunchback.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
that's a deep cut. Nice.
I was that kid that loved Hunchback of Notre
Oh, I
Dame.
love that
like
movie. It's
I was in
fantastic.
I was in third grade when I realized that I loved really strange music from my friends, and I saw that movie in theaters I think 7 times, and my mom took me 7 times, and I love the music. I love the soundtrack. It's a beautiful piece. And then I freaked out recently because one of the kids at my rink was skating to Out There, and I was like, it's going down. Yes. Because, 16-year-old knows the music, and I'm like, finally.
Yeah, right.
So I totally can relate to the whole idea of anxiety and just kind of what things what helps me kind of get through the anxiety stuff is just picturing shirtless firemen, and that carries me through.
I thought there was plenty of context for my statement.
Nope.
Yeah, in your head. Yeah, I'm sure that.
I mean, that calms down my anxiety too.
I'll just say different strokes, right? So, so my final question is about a piece that I saw online when I was every time we have someone on, we obviously research them, even if we know them already. We look at their work and things. Something popped up, and I want to know if this is actually you or if sometimes randomly people get tagged in things. But Purple Rock Scissors, which I believe is a design agency based out of Orlando. So this all kind of made sense to me. Looks like they hired you to come do a physical chalk wall. Is that correct?
They did. Yeah, I did it. Okay. I did 2 of them.
Okay. So here's my question. First of all, it looks great.
Thank you.
But secondly, and kind of more the actual question behind it, what's the difference for you between doing it digitally and then doing something in real life, first of all, in something larger than life? Because this thing looks like it's a 7 foot tall wall by maybe 10 feet wide. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, that wall, actually, I had to get on a ladder for that wall. I prefer digital so much.
Sure.
It gives me a lot more flexibility, because I can fake the chalk so well that I've fooled people that they assume that it's all real.
Right.
So yay. But doing it in real life, a lot of it is I don't like to do actual chalk work because it's a texture thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like how actual chalk feels. And I don't like that there's a certain brand I have to get because the Crayola squeaks and it just doesn't give a ton of pigmentation. But the Prang, I think Prang is the brand.
Okay, yeah. That sounds like a brand.
Yeah, that one is one where it's almost like a pastel, but it's softer, so it's less likely to make that awful squeak noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it picks up more of the texture of the wall.
Yeah, and it deposits a lot more onto the wall. So I go through the box a lot faster, but I don't get these these transparent lines. I get a nice solid line, so I'm not redoing my line over and over and over again to get some opacity on it.
And you don't get the command undo. So how does that help with your anxiety levels?
Yeah, the hardest thing was I actually did one mural for them where they wanted their logo on the wall, and their logo, if you saw it, it's a badge, so it's very straight. And so I actually had to go buy one of those chalk pinger things. Yeah. And I had to have one of the guys come over and just hold the end so that I could just go and
oh, nice, just
get a line
chalk
so
line.
I could follow. Yeah, and even then the floor is slanted, so I had to redo the line several times because I'd started and it was in line with the floor, but it was actually crooked. And I'm like, this is not working well for my perfectionist tendencies. It was,
or my anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was hard. It was a hard project. And I think the hardest part is just the fact of just trying to keep everything in the correct size so that I don't start with one letter that's a foot tall and end up with one that's 6 inches tall.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But it was an interesting experience, and I got a cool video out of it that my friend George did. So
Great.
That was fun.
Yeah, it would suck to have done something like that and have it not be documented.
Yeah, I don't think they documented. One of them they didn't document, but the second one, I think George was there and he documented the thing throughout the day. He'd come and take process shots.
Okay, so this will be my final question. I think the final question. I want to touch back on figure skating just a little bit. And is this ever a thing that's going to? Are you going to compete or do anything like that, or is it just an outlet for you right now?
It's actually something that. So when I lived in Jacksonville, I actually coached.
Okay. Cool.
I was a tot coach, so I worked with the 3 to 6 year olds.
Nice.
And occasionally the adults, and then occasionally I'd take the classes that they needed someone to fill in.
Sure.
But I was a tot coach, and then I moved down here, and they didn't have a need for coaches, so I haven't coached in a few years.
Okay.
But I have a rule where I will do competitions, but only if they're at my rink. I won't travel for them.
Okay.
I've traveled for one when I was still in Jacksonville. I went all the way down to Ellenton, Florida for the Southwest Figure Skating Classic, and skated 2 different events and took first in both events,
Nice.
which was fun. Won't lie, that was fun. I got to meet Paul Wiley. He was just walking around there. I got to see John Zimmerman because he was just walking around there as former Olympians.
Yeah.
And these are figure skaters.
I was gonna say I don't know who these people are.
Oh yeah, no, these are
Super impressed.
Which poster artist did you meet there? That's probably my.
Yeah. So it's fun, but we at my rink currently we have quite a few competitions that roll through, and there's one in particular that I always miss because it's the same weekend as Creative South. So I can't ever do that one. But I am competing later this year. They have it's called the ISI Adult Championship.
Okay. And
because they've opened up a whole world of adult skating, so there are ladies and gentlemen in their 70s, 80s, 90s skating.
Whoa.
There was a gentleman at my old rink that he was a heart surgeon, and he was in his 80s and he was retired, and he's like, I always wanted to skate, wanted to learn, I'm out here.
Wow.
And he learned how to skate, and he would just skate around happy as can be. There was this lady, Yvonne Downing, I think is her name. She recently passed away, but she's actually immortalized in an award that goes to the oldest competitor at a USFSA adult national competition.
Wow.
And so, but she was in her 90s, I believe, and she skated her whole life, and she just continued skating until about 2 weeks before her passing. But yeah, so I plan on competing though in the adult champs at my rink later this year. I plan on competing dance and just having fun.
Yeah,
Next
that's
time
awesome.
I come down there, we are going skating.
Deal.
Yes.
Patrick
absolutely.
is Patrick's the Scott Hamilton of my friends. Anyway,
In that I'm balding. That's what he means.
in that he's balding. I actually saw Scott
Hamilton.
I saw Scott Hamilton in Orlando at Universal Studios. He was walking around with a handler. Yeah, at Universal, he was going into the Shrek ride, and I was like, "That's Scott Hamilton."
There
And the
it
fact
is.
that I even knew that was like that, and that exhausted my knowledge.
But
Nancy Kerrigan.
That's the only one I would know, because growing up, there's a performance, and it's Scott Hamilton, and
One that Patrick's named after.
he's skating to the song Hair, and he does like 2 backflips during the routine. And for some reason, my mom had that on a VHS, and so I watched it like over and over as a kid.
I know that performance too.
That is the only one burned into my head is Scott Hamilton Hair.
Whatever is ironic.
Yeah, my favorite one by him is him skating to "Steppin' Out" by Tony Bennett. That's a good one to look up.
And I'm gonna look it up. All right.
He does a backflip in that one too. He actually, I think he's the reason. He and Surrey Bonnet are the reasons that backflips are no longer allowed in competition.
Yeah, because they perfected it, and they're like, you know what? No one can do it better.
Or
No
people
one
are
else
trying it and just getting hurt.
And so fun fact, actually, Scott Hamilton learned the backflip because he was approached by like potential like tours and stuff, and he said, well, what is it worth for me to learn it? And they're like, about $1 million.
Wow.
So he learned that backflip.
That was
Deal.
Patrick, Luke, if you guys want to do a GoFundMe for $1 million, I will learn how to backflip.
on ice skates? I think we can probably get that.
All right, so Shauna, tell everybody where they can find your work, they can support this new venture, how they can follow you and see what you're doing and support you.
You can go to simplethoughts.co and check out the card line there. Purchase the code grand opening will get you 15% off a purchase of $10 or more.
Awesome.
Through the end of June. You can see my personal work at shaunaparmesan.com. Instagram and Twitter are Shauna Parmesan, and I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/ShaunaLynn.
That's awesome. And I can speak. I mean, I bought a handful of your cards while we were at Creative South, and they're fun. They're creative. They make me not want to send them. They kind of look like little fun pieces of art, but I will send them. I promise. But they're very cool. So go pick that up and use the code and get, it's free money, people. Come on now. So can you do us a favor and help us find out our tokens for next week?
Sure.
Perfect. Well, that's it for this interview portion. Up next, we're going to draw some tokens. Every week we draw tokens to find out exactly the categories we're going to be talking about. And then we pick our categories? Nope. Topics based on those categories. We've only been doing this for 3 years. I'm still new at it. I'm going to go ahead and shuffle these up. You're going to give me a number between 1 and 3. I have these, physical tokens in my hand, which because you've held them in your hand.
She has held them.
One of only a handful of our guests who have ever actually held these. Okay, they're all shuffled up. I don't know where they're at. Give me a number between 1 and 3, and you'll be picking for Luke.
All right. I'm going to say 1.
Art and design, Luke.
Nice.
Congratulations. All right, go ahead and pick between 1 and 2, and you'll be picking for me.
Between 1 and 2, I'm going to go with 2.
Toys and games. That means, Patrick, you have your own TV and film.
I promise I'll watch something this week, guys.
Perfect. You could tell us about the Office finale.
Talk about The Bachelorette. That's on tonight.
There you go.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Oh, my gosh.
What's the... Oh, gosh. We don't have time. All right. You can find us on mf1podcast.com, where you can find show notes and links to all the stuff we talked about. You can get right to Shauna's simple thoughts page and all of her Instagram stuff right on there. If you can't remember everything that she said, you can find it on our website, as well as gosh, who even knows how many interviews we've done at this point, but so many incredibly talented people. Go to our archive, mf1podcast.com/archive, to see so many talented, cool people talk to us about their art and their life. And you can go to mf1podcast.com/Slack to join us and Shauna in the Slack channel throughout the week. And then, like she said, find her on the Twitch. The Twitch, is that how you call it? No, I'll probably just say Twitch.
I think it's
probably
Twitch.
just say Twitch. To catch her live streaming on there. You can also subscribe on iTunes and Stitcher. I have so many words in my head right now. It's hard to say any of them.
If you search M of One Podcast, you'll find us.
Search M of One Podcast anywhere and you'll find us. Right. Social media, it's all there. But when you go to subscription time, that's not what you'd want to say. But when you go to iTunes and you subscribe, there's another thing we want you to do. Patrick, why don't you say words now?
Rate and review. That's right. Tell us what you think about the show. Good, bad, and different. It doesn't really matter. Just click some stars and then type some words.
Preferably many stars, little words.
Yeah, as many stars as you could possibly click. That would help us a ton.
And
Give
whatever
them all
you say,
5s.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, and whatever you say, like literally whatever you say, we will read it on the podcast.
Shauna is going to literally hang up with this conversation and she's going to go rate it. So everybody tune in to iTunes right now. And you can see how she rated us. And then you go and do the same because everyone wants to be like Shauna. And then finally, if you want to support the show financially, you can go to patreon.com/M1podcast. You can become a patron for as little as $1. The blooper level is $5. It gets you an episode every single month. That is just chock full of ridiculousness.
It's stupid.
As well as some other bonuses and exclusives.
Oh, we have a new one next week.
It's true.
Yep.
So if you want to become a patron, now is the time to do it. Patreon.com/M of One Podcast. I think we are going to get out of here. I'm Andrew.
I'm Patrick.
I'm Luke.
I'm Shauna.
Peace out.
Bye.
Hold on to your butts.
Have a great week.
So for this Sandbox episode, we are excited to talk to somebody who we are buddies with. We have done so much. Let me start that over.
Okay.
I like the phrase buddy.
I threw this in just a sense of exasperation at my screen. I was like, oh, that was terrible. And I threw it. I said that just in case you guys saw me do that, and I just wanted to acknowledge it. All right. So for this Sandbox episode, we're excited. That was just a mess of words. That's fine.